From beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, this is the Neglected News Report. I'm your co-host, Scott Mitchell, here with my brother, Kevin.
Good evening, folks.
And we've got a show for you guys tonight. We actually might run over time tonight just a little bit. So, just thought I'd warn you that might happen. We got a lot planned for you, so buckle yourselves in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Okay, where are we? First of all, I want to start the show off tonight by recognizing the death of a truly great person today. One of the big three of the 80s that fought for freedom, along with Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul III. It was Margaret Thatcher. She passed away today at the age of 87.
The Iron Lady.
The Iron Lady is right. I have yet to see that movie with Meryl Streep. I hear she did a very good depiction of Margaret Thatcher, even though she is a lib.
Well, I was serving in Germany in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were running the world. It was very comforting to know that they were really adults. Well, I'm not going to compare them to who runs the world these days.
Why not? Go ahead. You have to.
Well, it was very nice knowing that you were that I was serving on the East German border and that I actually had backup. That I actually had Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in my corner.
And while you were serving in the army over in Germany, I was serving beer here.
I was drinking beer there as well.
Anyway, we got a lot to go over today, guys. So we might go over an hour tonight. It's very likely that we may do that.
We'll see.
Anyway, it's been a wacky week for me personally, guys. I'm just healing. I had a car accident last week, and but for the hand of God, and I say that with all candor, I might not be sitting here today. It was a close call. Probably within about a foot or two of being in the hospital or possibly even dying. Anyway, I'm good though. Just hassling it out now with the insurance company on getting the money and trying to get a loan to buy a new car.
Sometimes death is better than dealing with insurance companies.
Yeah, no kidding. Anyway, well, let's see. What do you got tonight?
Well, I thought we were going to start with that recording, that Obama night, talking about.
Oh, which one are you talking about? The MSNBC or the?
Yes, the MSNBC.
Okay, this. I don't even want to call her an info babe like Rushwood because she's not. I mean, this Melissa Harris Perry of MSNBC. That's the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's very disturbing.
Yeah, it's extremely disturbing. Listen to this clip.
And these words are strictly chosen. Don't think they're by accident.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
This is like It Takes a Village on steroids.
But I got news for you, Miss Harris Perry, and I hate hyphenated last names for women. I don't care if you're a conservative, Republican, liberal, Democrat. You know what? Especially if you're a conservative Republican. It's tradition. Yeah, we live in a patriarchal society. A lot of you out there, mainly those who have to sit down to pee, aren't going to like hearing that. But it's the truth. And there's a reason why.
Now,
how many matriarchal societies really survive and go anywhere in this world nowadays? How many are around, huh?
I think that was a 27-second clip, and there's a lot to unfold. First of all, stating that we don't spend enough money on education is just ludicrous. My gosh.
Well, wait. Actually, she's got a point now that I think about it.
What?
We don't spend enough on education. We spend most of it on administration in education. Think about it.
Well, we sent a lot to the teachers' unions. I know that.
I mean, Kevin and I are well, my old high school algebra teacher, junior year. Kevin knows who he is. I don't think he had him. He's
he's a public.
He's the national
Dennis
president.
Van Rokel.
Dennis Van Rokel. He is the the national president of the NEA, the biggest teachers union in the country. I mean, great guy, great teacher, but come on, Denny. You know.
Yeah, but this idea, how long have we heard there's not enough money spent on education? The more money we spend, the dumber our kids get. What's with that? I mean, what does it really cost to educate children? It really...
You know what it's like? It's like investing money in junk bonds. You invest it, and you all of a sudden you say, well, I'm not getting anything in return. Well, it's because it's a freaking junk bond.
Yeah. And also, then this is not by accident, because Obama uses these words, very similarly. The collective. That's not by accident. When the collective, is that very Borgish or what? That is.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, that's calm.
Hive mentality.
And again, Joseph McCarthy did us no justice, because we can't call a communist anymore without sounding reactionary. But those are catchphrases.
Well, it wasn't Joseph McCarthy. It was the people who reacted to what he said.
Well, I understand that, but his tactics were a little heavy-handed, and
he was a pit bull.
Yeah, and he made a lot of people angry. Hollywood went after him, and so the end result is, to this day, you can't really call a communist without sounding like you're paranoid and reactionary,
or with people from the right sounding offended.
Yeah, even though Alger Hiss really was a spy.
I mean, well, Richard Nixon discovered him out in the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings back before McCarthy, back in the late 40s, like 48, 49. He was the one who prosecuted Alger Hiss, who was a dyed-in-the-wool commie in the State Department.
I love throwing this one at liberals, because then they really think you're crazy. Lucille Ball was a card-carrying communist.
Yeah, I remember that, hearing about that.
People look at you, Lucille
Ball?
What?
Hey, she had red hair.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, she was actually a card-carrying communist. Now, when early on in Hollywood, before communists got a bad name, before Stalin started murdering millions of his own people, a lot of Hollywood people and a lot of workers here in the United States thought that the communist movement was just a really nice labor movement. So you have to excuse some of the people for falling for it, and I believe Lucille Ball was probably
Eugene
one of
Debs notwithstanding.
Yeah.
How many times did he run for president and from jail even?
But no, but she really was a card carrier. So was Desi Arnaz. But
I believe Desi Arnaz supported Castro, didn't he? In '58,
probably
when he took over from Batista.
I don't know. I don't want to say anything. I don't know. But Sean Penn certainly does.
Danny Glover.
Beyonce
and Jay-Z. That's deplorable. Come on. And you know what? There are two congresswomen, both from Florida, I believe, that are investigating it to see if they had the proper credentials and permits. Good for them. They should.
You know, when I see very well-to-do people embrace dictators like Castro and Hugo Chavez, basically communist banana republic dictators, my mind always says, okay, why would you do that when this country has offered you so much fame and so much wealth? Then you have to ask yourself, you ask yourself why. And the only answer that I have is that communists never believe communism is for the communists. It's always for the people. So they always think that, communism is going to be great because I'm still going to have my wealth. You're just not going to have yours. I already got mine. You ain't going to get yours. And that's the only thing I can think of because it's a very inhumane, very
how many of them
vicious.
How many of them are actually allowed to stick around after it all comes down?
Well, it all depends. The one thing that falls is the middle class. That has to be done away with. And if you were to listen to Obama talk, you would think that he loved the middle class. Well, no, he doesn't.
No, not in the least.
No, Marxists do. And trust me, Obama's a Marxist.
And that's in capitalism, which kind of brings me to a story here. Death of America. Leaked U.S. Army document outlines plan for re-education camps in America. Let's see, it says, a leaked U.S. Army document prepared for the Department of Defense contains shocking plans for political activists to be pacified by PSYOP officers into developing a quote, appreciation of U.S. policies while detained in prison camps inside the United States. The document entitled FM 3-39.40, Internment and it's hard to read this, and Resettlement Operations, was originally released on a restricted basis to the Department of Defense in February of 2010, but has now been leaked online.
What's the source of this?
This is from... Oh, heck. Where is it? It's from secretsofthefed.com. You've gotten there, before, haven't you?
I don't think so.
But the actual PDF can be downloaded to look at it for more detail. Basically, they want to use psyops, psychological methods, basically, like we use in Guantanamo Bay, to brainwash people into loving the government,
sure,
even though you don't agree with it. And it's just plain and simple brainwashing. It's right out of 1984. If you've ever read 1984, you know they used methods like that. And one of the things they do bring up in that article is loud music. They do that down in Guantanamo Bay for them down there. They did that with Noriega, remember?
Psyops are being used against American people constantly, from the shows they watch to the news they listen to, just about everything except maybe even sports. I don't know.
And why are they doing this now?
Because they want to condition people.
This leads into something. The Larry, the video,
Larry and Larry from
no,
New
not
York
Larry and Daryl. No. Okay, you guys have heard of Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn.
Well, explain.
They are buddies of Obama's.
Well, explain who they are.
Oops, that shouldn't have happened.
Well, I'll explain.
Okay, go
Bill
ahead.
Ayers and Bernadine Dorn were from the Weather Underground. They were a homegrown terrorist group from the late 1960s, early 70s. They attempted to overthrow the government. They were communists, and they were thwarted. Although they never, I don't know if they ever went to jail. However, I think Bill Dorn got tenure at a university, which typically happens to communist radicals in this country.
Didn't what's his name?
Mark
Rudd? Didn't Mark Rudd spend time in prison?
Not sure, but Angela Davis has tenure at Berkeley, and she blew up a police station, I believe.
Yeah.
But,
well, I mean, the Weather Underground blew up the Pentagon, a portion of the Pentagon. They blew up the police precinct house in New York. They had some botched ones, too, where some of their members got killed. Anyway, they're now, like I said, they're teaching our kids, And Obama just says, oh, Bill Ayers, yeah, he's just a guy from the neighborhood. Excuse me? The first fundraiser that launched Obama's political, was it for president or just his political career? Political career, right?
Yeah, he shows up for a barbecue by
accident at Bill Ayers' house to raise money for his campaign. Yeah. Anyway, these guys are hell-bent, them and groups like them, the Students for Democratic Society, SDS, they took over the Cornell administration building in, what was it, like 60, was it, I thought it was earlier.
Was it the summer of the
I think it was the early 60s.
Democrat National Convention, was it?
No. They took that over.
Was that earlier?
It was in the early, it was like 1960.
Was it that early?
Is when it started, if I'm not mistaken. They
That
took
was a
over the
beatnik
Cornell University administration building, and after a few days of holding it, the administration gave in because they wanted peace. That's the whole thing. Appeasement. We've appeased these guys for too long, and now they feel they can run roughshod over us. And guess what? They are, folks. Anyway, get back to the Weather Underground. They want to take over. They're basically communists. They just want to use...
not basically, they are.
Yeah, I know.
Because communism is the way to control the people, and that's the only way to do it.
It's textbook Cloward Piven. If you don't know what Cloward Piven is, Cloward Piven is collapsing the system. Frances Fox Piven and her husband, who has now assumed room temperature, I forget his first name anyway, they developed a theory during the 60s and 70s where you collapse the system and then that opens it up for communists to take over.
And they thought that the Watts riots was a wonderful thing, that was that would be their model in the future to overthrow a government.
Yep. Anyway, was it the FBI that Larry Grathwohl was a member of?
I believe so.
Larry Grathwohl, it was during the from like September of '69 to like February of 1970, infiltrated the Weather Underground. He was an FBI agent, and some of you may have seen him.
I think he was an informant. Don't know that he was an agent, but
no, I think he was a plant.
Was he?
I'm almost sure he was a plant.
All right.
Anyway, he's making a comeback now on a lot of shows, but he was he infiltrated the Weather Underground, sat in on some of their meetings, and then got out. Only for a short period of time, like maybe 5 months, from like September 1969 to February of 1970, I believe is what I read. And he came out with some chilling stuff. Here's a 2-minute video or sound clip, so you get an idea of what it is.
I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. We become responsible then for administrating, 250 million people. And there was no answers. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people? The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and the Chinese and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. And they felt that this counter-revolution could best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education centers in the Southwest, where we would take all the people who needed to be re-educated into the new way of thinking and teach them how things were going to be. I ask, well, what is going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate, that are die-hard capitalists? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, they estimated that they would have to eliminate 25 million people in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill. 25 million people. Now, I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
Okay. The first thing that has to be said about this, that was from like 1970, 71. 250 million people. We now have 310 million people. 1/10 of them would have to be killed because they would have a counter-revolution or start a counter-revolution, and they wouldn't fall into lockstep. Now the number rises to about 31 million, I'd say, based on their numbers.
If you're listening to this show, you're probably going to be one of those.
Well, let's not say if you're listening. If you like this show, you're probably one of them.
Okay.
Okay, that's more fair. Because I have a feeling Media Matters is listening.
Yeah.
Or will.
Basically, they're psychopaths. They're just, they have. Who would take over a country and not even have a plan on how you're going to govern it, or any other plan other than a psychopath, and other than anybody who's just interested in pure power? And basically, that's why communism is always the system that's chosen, because that's the only way that you can really enslave people and control them.
Practically everything that this current administration does is not for the thing that they say it's for. It's to control. Guns, the gun control debate right now is not to control guns. It is not to get rid of guns. It is to control people and their behavior. Good example. Mayor Bloomberg in New York. He wants to control trans fats, salt, sugary drinks, guns.
What does Ben call him? Mayor Fascist? He has a name for him. Mayor Fascist. Something, I forgot the name.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
But and now when it comes to guns, he's spending his own money. The guy's a billionaire, by the way. You've heard of Bloomberg News? That's him.
He's in the top 50 richest men in the world.
He's using his money to spread this whole anti-gun thing all around the country to other cities. And you got idiot mayors who are falling in lockstep with him. It's about control. It's all plain and simply. It's not to make us safer.
Well, when it comes to news and information that I hear anymore, I don't know. Have you ever had an old house? I'm sure everybody has. And,
mine's almost 20 years old.
Well,
old enough.
A lot of things don't work, and I'm sure that a few of you have had an old sink that had a faucet where the spigots were flip-flopped. The hot was really the cold, and the cold
My house
was
is
really
like that right now.
the cold was really the hot.
I've got electrical outlets upside down.
In order to get hot water, you had to turn on the cold. In order to get cold water, you had to turn on the hot. So every time you approached the sink, you had to make this mental adjustment. Okay, cold's hot, hot's cold. That's how I view the news, and that's how I view information anymore, because we're being deceived so often that I just automatically flip what I'm hearing on its head, and if it makes more sense than what I'm hearing, I run with that, because that's the world we live in right now. We live in such a world of deceit, and it's done purposely. It's done for a reason.
And it was predicted, and here we go. If you're an atheist, cover your ears. It's predicted in the Bible that toward the end that these things are going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you folks, gird your loins. You know?
You want to talk about some financial issues?
Yeah, let's lighten the mood a little bit.
Well, sometimes I could go on forever like this. You know?
I know. And by the way, guys, if you're listening to us and thinking, these guys aren't professionals, guess what? You're right. We're not. As a matter of fact, I don't know that as much about some of the stuff Kevin talks about as he does, and vice versa. We're trying to learn just along with you guys. We're just two guys that are concerned about our country, concerned about our future and our family's futures, and about the world around us, and we're just trying to make sense of it, and hopefully you guys, it'll spur some of you guys to do research like we do.
But here's what we can, well, not we can all, at least my brother and I can agree on. There's something not right out there. Just, the old antennas start, remember My Favorite Martian when his antenna would come up? Boy, I hear some stuff and I just, man, that ain't necessarily true, is it?
Nope.
So, well, anyway, I want to talk about a little financial news here, because, we're talking about deception, and I believe a lot of what we're being told right now, if not outright deception, is definitely being manipulated, and just definitely being massaged and made to appear, different, made to appear better than it really is. Well, this doesn't fall into that category, but it's very scary. It's from The Hill. It's entitled "Obama Budget to Obama Budget to Take Aim at Wealthy IRAs." Sounds like Cyprus, doesn't it? Just the title of the article does. It says President Obama's budget to be released next week will limit how much wealthy individuals, and it says like Mitt Romney, I don't know why they threw that in there, can keep in IRAs and other retirement accounts. The proposal would save around $9 billion over a decade, a senior administration official said, while also bringing more fairness to the tax code. Okay, I'm interjecting this right now. We have a $17 trillion debt, almost $17 trillion, not quite. We'll be hitting there.
But it's manageable.
Yeah, right. And it's going to save $9 billion over a decade. That's less than $1 billion a year. I know to you and I that's a lot of money, but when you throw that into what our total debt is, it's so minuscule that it doesn't even matter, and that's very important as we go on, because it's really not about that. It's about punishment is what it's about. It goes on to say the senior administration officials said that wealthy taxpayers can currently, quote, accumulate many millions of dollars in these accounts, substantially more than is needed to fund reasonable levels of retirement saving. Reasonable levels of retirement savings. Okay, who determines that?
Right.
That's kind of chilling. That's almost as chilling as that stupid woman talking about your kids. Under the plan, it goes on to say, a taxpayer's tax-preferred retirement account, like an IRA, could not finance more than $205,000 per year of retirement, or right around $3 million this year. So they're telling you the maximum that you're going to be able to pull out per year on your IRA, regardless of what you put in there. And remember, when people put money into these instruments, that money's going to invest in other things. That's what keeps our country going.
In hopes of getting a return to bring them more money.
Yeah. I mean, this is called capitalism. What we're practicing right now is not capitalism, it's fascism.
Well, it's
I'm not done.
corporatism.
Yeah, it's corporate. Well, which is
Yeah.
you're picking winners and choosers. Winners and losers.
Right.
Winners and choosers. So it goes on. It says Romney, Obama's 2012 opponent, had an IRA several to many times that amount, meaning more than $3 million a year, leading to questions about how the former Massachusetts governor was able to squirrel, I love that word, squirrel away so much money in that sort of retirement account. The president's budget, oh boy, that's like throwing paint on a wall. Boy, it's ugly. The president's budget expected Wednesday has several revenue-raising proposals. Revenue, i.e., taxes. Revenue-raising. They don't call them taxes anymore. The revenue-raising proposals that come as Democrats and Republicans continue to spar over whether more tax increases are needed to reduce deficits. Obama's framework also includes higher taxes on cigarettes. I don't know how you guys can afford to smoke those things. As a way to pay for expanded access to pre-kindergarten. Cigarettes, where does he come up with this? It's all about the kids. See what he does? He throws the kids in there. Pre-kindergarten. Taxes on cigarettes and pre-kindergarten. My word. Congressional tax writers in both parties and both chambers are currently examining the code in hopes of broad tax reform package. So, what they're telling you is they're saying, hey, we're going to tell you how much money you can make. We're going to, and if you're making over a certain amount, we're going to take it from you. That's what's happening in Cyprus right now. That's not capitalism. And it's going to end in, it's not going to end in a good way.
Well, these things usually end in war.
Well,
World War.
We can go into that too. But, we could go in a bunch of different tangents, but I think we should kind of stay.
And folks, we're not doom and gloomers. We hope we're wrong. But we're just going by what history has shown. That's how things like this usually end. They don't end well.
Okay, we're staying. I've got two more articles. I want to stay on the economic front because I think that's where everything's going to end up. Where the end result of everything is going to show up. This article is by the Associated Press, by the way. And it's entitled, The Associated Press on the Latest Job Numbers. A recovery isn't supposed to be this way. Duh. Are we in a recovery? We've been told so, but how many of you think we're in a recovery? We've got, what is it? How many people are, what's the percentage of people on food stamps right now?
I don't remember now.
It's like 1 out of...
It's like 1 out of 5. 1 out of, or maybe it's like 55 million.
Yeah, it's a little less.
It's about 16%.
It's under 20%. It's about
16% then.
Yeah.
It's 1 out of every 6 is about 16%.
But this article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to give you the point. And what I find really poignant about it is who is writing it. It's the Associated Press, which is typically, mainstream media and not really, not really a conservative, conservative news source. It starts out by saying, after a full year of after a full year of fruitless job hunting, Natasha Babler just gave up. She'd already abandoned hope of getting work in her field, counseling the disabled. But she couldn't land anything else, not even a job interview at a telephone call center. Until she feels confident enough to send out resumes again, she'll get by on food stamps and disability checks from Social Security and live with her parents in St. Louis. I'm not proud of it, says Babler, who is in her mid-30s and is blind. The only way I'm able to sustain myself is... the only way I'm able to sustain any semblance of self-preservation is to rely on government programs that I have no desire to be on. Babler's frustrating experience has become all too common nearly 4 years after the Great Recession ended. Many Americans are still so discouraged that they've given up on the job market. Older Americans have retired early, younger ones have enrolled in school. Others have suspended their job hunt until the employment landscape brightens. Some, like Babler, are collecting disability check. It isn't supposed to be this way. This is what the Associated Press is saying. After recession, an improving economy is supposed to bring people back into the job market. Instead, the number of Americans in the labor force, those who have a job or are looking for one, fell by nearly 500,000 people from February to March, the government said Friday. And the percentage of working-age adults in the labor force, what's called the participation rate, fell to 63.3% last month. It's the lowest such figure since May 1979, Scott, who was president back then.
1979, Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, they had the misery index.
Yep.
Misery, yeah, that was stagflation. The falling participation rate tarnished the only apparent good news in the jobs report the Labor Department released Friday. The unemployment rate dropped to a 4-year low of 7.6%. And I'm laughing because it's sad. It fell to a 4-year low of 7.6% in March from 7.7 in February. But here's what Obama's not telling you. People without a job who stopped looking for one are no longer counted as unemployed. That's why the U.S. unemployment rate dropped in March despite weak hiring. If the 496,000 people who left the labor force last month had still been looking for jobs, the employment rate would have risen to 7.9% in March. That's 2 percentage points higher. That's huge. Unemployment dropped for all the wrong reasons, says Craig Alexander, chief economist with TD Bank Financial Group. It dropped because more workers stopped looking for jobs. It signaled less confidence and optimism that there are jobs out there. And I'm not going to go on because it goes on to break the numbers down even farther.
But you see, and here's the thing. The Obama administration will not bring that fact out, that people dropped out. They allow the media, they allow the right-wing media to do it because then they can come out and say that they're extremists. That's just, it's, you know.
Well, or ne'er-do-wells. I mean, I've been accused of that. You know, I mean, come on.
Doom and gloomers.
Yeah.
No, they're reporting the facts.
I mean, if the unemployment rate was really improving, wouldn't food stamps recipients be would the number of food stamp recipients be going down?
Not to mention the fact that another facet of government assistance that's going up right now is disability claims.
Well, that's just another way for people to fund their, you know, I mean,
well,
they
yeah,
have to get by.
When they get by, when they exhaust all of their unemployment, that's what they're doing quite a bit.
So what I tried to do in these last two articles is give you an idea of, you know, what's really happening and what the government's planning to do. They're going to raid your accounts, just like.
And they say that
like Cyprus.
And they say they're going to go after, like with Cyprus, they say they're going to go after the rich first. Well, guess what started out that same way, and now it affected everyone? Income tax. Income tax started out as just for the rich. You made a certain amount of money, you got an income tax put on you. Now it's for everyone. They do it incrementally. It's called incrementalism. That's why back during the 90s, when or not during the 90s, it was actually during Reagan's term in office, after he got shot, the Brady campaign, when Jim Brady, his press secretary, got shot and was partially paralyzed for the rest of his life, his wife started a big campaign to get gun control laws passed, some of which got passed under Clinton. But they started small, and they've been gradually increasing what they want to control.
That's progressivism.
Exactly. It's progressivism, incrementalism, whatever you want to call it. And by the way, progressivism it's basically, I'm kind of getting away from calling them liberals, because if you really take a classical liberal,
I don't use that term.
Kevin and I here have more in common with a real classic liberal like John Kennedy. Yes, I said it. We have more in common with him than we do with some of these clowns out there now, like John McCain and Lindsey Graham. Those guys are morons.
Okay, well, that last article regarding unemployment is just one example of how the government's not really telling you the truth about how things are really out there. And I've got another one, and this is really poignant. This is how the Fed is helping to rig the stock market. So right now, one of the big bright spots, according to the administration, is the stock market is just rocking and rolling. The Dow today closed at 14,613. That was an uptick of about 48 points.
Is that an all-time high, or is it hit over 15?
I don't think it's an all-time high, but it's up there. You know, it's riding high. It's an increase of 48 points. The NASDAQ closed at 3,222. That is show in the 70s. Room 222, yeah. And that was
Karen Valentine.
Yes.
Hubba hubba.
That was an increase of about 18 points. So, this is from Forbes, and it's entitled "How the Fed is Helping to Rig the Stock Market," and I'm going to try to simplify it. It starts out a little complicated. I've highlighted a lot of this stuff, but in the end, I'll sum it up. It says there's been a lot of talk about the Federal Reserve rigging the stock market. If you've been wondering, as I have, how it is being done, here's some terrific insight from our own David Sanchi. He said, in essence, the Fed is exchanging about $4 billion in newly created money every business day for various types of bonds. All else being equal, the Fed's bond buying puts more money in investors' hands to buy other assets, including stocks. I'm skipping a paragraph to go on because it just kind of reiterates what I just said. Here's what happens as I see it now. Every day, Federal Reserve traders are buying about $4 billion in long-term treasuries and mortgage bonds from major trading houses. How does the Fed pay for these purchases? Simple. The Fed gives a seller a credit on their Federal Reserve statement. Remember, the Fed is a bank that can legally give away money. Meanwhile, the seller of the bonds to the Fed can then withdraw some or all of that money or leave it on deposit with the Fed. In other words, the Fed doesn't pay anyone anything. All the Fed does is, in essence, create new money to give the seller. Yeah, I'm not done here yet, but they print money out of thin air. So let us follow that newly created money. The major dealers who sell the bonds to the Fed can take that money and buy other bonds in the open market. The new seller then gets paid with that newly created money, which in the bank clearing system acts just the same as money you and I work for. Although this is not work for, though, these are my words. Therefore, to make this really simple, the Fed creates $4 billion a day, and eventually some of that money goes into equities. And that, of course, helps keep stock prices elevated. So it doesn't matter that we are having major problems with the underlying economy and markets that normally would depress stock prices. And it goes on to say, why is the Fed doing something that would be a crime if anyone other than the Fed did this? It's because wealth creation is the only policy action of this government that works. It seems that the Fed is willing to keep stock prices elevated so the Obama administration can keep spending trillions of dollars that really don't exist. How long can this go on? At some point, gravity wins out. For now, equity inflows continue. Let's see what happens when the inflows stop. Will corporate selling surge or not? We'll be watching.
Here's the thing you got to also realize, folks. It's illegal for the government to print money. Constitution, in the enumerated powers given to the federal government, 10th Amendment says what? Basically, it says these, certain powers are enumerated to the federal government. Those that are not are reserved to the states or the people. Not and the people, but or the people, which is a big distinction. One of those powers is the power to mint money, not print it. Why? Minting requires you to use precious metals, which have value. Paper does not have value. The first step toward taking this off the gold standard happened during the Depression with FDR. There's a good book called The Forgotten Man by
Nixon.
Nixon finalized, put the final nail in the coffin. It started with FDR. FDR would get together.
FDR also confiscated gold.
Yes. Read The Forgotten Man by Amity Shlays. If you want to find out about the Depression from a different point of view other than what you've read in the past, read it. It's an awesome book. They would sit down and they would literally say, okay, what price do we want gold to be today? And they'd raise it or lower it accordingly. They would literally sit there. He would sit there. Finally, his Secretary of Treasury, the Treasurer, just finally had it. And then FDR went after him. I forget who his Treasurer was now. Anyway, it started then, and then Nixon put the final nail in the coffin by taking us off the gold standard. There was a reason why our paper money was on the gold standard. Because what backed it meant something, which was gold. The best thing for you to do, I know not everyone can afford gold, silver. $30 an ounce approximately right now.
No, it's 27 something right now.
It went down?
Today. It's 27 something.
Here's the thing about precious metals. They will buy the same thing now as they did 100 years ago. You're not going to make money. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. You'll make money. But you won't make buying power. Sure, an ounce of gold, even 5 years ago went for what? It went for 300 some an ounce.
It's a store of value.
Exactly. As the value of the dollar goes down, the price of gold goes up, and that makes sense because it takes more dollars to buy the same ounce of gold. That's the way you got to look at it. You can buy the same thing now with an ounce of gold that you bought 100 years ago.
Well, exactly. Someone put it to me this way, some months ago. They said if you were to buy a really nice suit in, the turn of the century, the 19th century, it would have cost you a $20 gold coin to buy that suit. Today, that very same suit would cost you that same coin, but that coin would be valued at probably, closer to $1,500, $1,600, $1,700, only because the value of the dollar is so low. But
right.
but that gold retains its original, its intended value, and I think it's divine personally.
Yeah. I forgot what the heck it was. Oh, so basically, as we progress down toward this precipice. Oh, you think we got over the fiscal cliff earlier this year?
Oh, go into what the Fed is. People don't realize the Fed's not a federal entity.
No, they're not owned by the federal government. Aren't they like
the banksters?
They're banksters. Well, and Alexander Hamilton in the early days of the Republic tried to start the U.S. Bank. Washington told him no, don't do it, and it failed. And there was good reason. I mean, Washington was a smart dude.
The people that are pulling the strings, as far as your the money you have or you think you have, are not acting in your best.
They're acting in their own interest, and that's it. It's all about greed. It's all about greed and power. That's all it's about. It's all it's ever been about with anyone, any dictator in history. It's all been about greed and power. That's all. Or greed for power. But true greed is this. Greed is not trying to hold on to what you got. Greed is demanding, or not trying to hold on to what's yours. It's demanding what's not yours. And they're demanding what's ours. They feel that they're divinely appointed to take what we have.
And look at these little weirdos. George Soros, Rockefeller, what's his
Kennedy,
Rothschild.
Well, not
look
Kennedy.
At these
Kennedy
little, look at these little ghouls. Look at these little ghouls who are, who these are really the puppet masters. Yep. You think Obama and
nope.
all the heads of state run things? No, they don't.
They're useful idiots for these guys.
These little ghouls run things.
Mm-hmm. As Andrew Wilkow is fond of saying, socialism is not it's for the people, not the socialists.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the only way they can control people like you and me is by keeping us in bondage. And one of the best ways to keep us in bondage is to put us under socialism or communism and let us believe that that's a really good system.
Yep.
And it's not. It's slavery.
And let people still think they have their freedoms. Because you know how many people out there think they still have their freedoms?
Because they have an iPod.
Yeah, well, once again, going back to Bob Mohan. Former talk show host here in the Phoenix area back during the 80s and 90s. He said as long as people have their house, their MTV, their car, their salad shooter, they think they got everything they need. They're
bread
happy.
Bread and circus.
Bread and circus. That's exactly
that's the Roman days. But this is even worse. I think we're a lot more nefarious. Not bad times. Let's put it that way.
They got people sidetracked by cool stuff, entertainment, and what's the biggest thing on the earth right now? Entertainment, whether you call it sports, or TV, or movies, or music. Now, I used to be huge when it came to sports. Ask Kevin. The last 10 years or so, I don't care so much for it anymore, and that saddens me because I love baseball. I really love baseball. And it saddens me that I can't watch it. Although the Diamondbacks are kicking some butt right now, so far. I know it's only the first week.
3 games into the season.
No, it's a week into the season. They're like 5-1.
Ooh.
They just swept the Brewers over the weekend.
All right.
But, and it really hurts. It hurts. And another thing that hurts, there's a lot of cool movies out there, a lot of cool music, but it's really difficult to justify at times spending money to watch a movie or listen to music by someone who's a freaking socialist. You know? Or stands for things that you don't stand for. I mean, it makes it difficult. You know, it really does. Because you're contributing and supporting their lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle. I mean, like, all you guys out there that love Beyonce and Jay-Z, you know, or like Danny Glover movies, or Sean Penn movies, they sympathize with communists. It's in the news, guys. You don't have to look very far to know that. You know, I don't know what, it's really difficult to justify spending the money on for something by them. You know, by any of them. Well, what are you going to do? Just cut yourself off entirely from all that? I mean, some people would say, yeah, that's the way to do it. But then, what are you going to do? Well, read books. Well, okay. I'm a big fan of Stephen King. Stephen King is a big lib. You know? Scares the crap out of me when I read his books. Well, somewhat. I'm not that easy. Although Duma Key was really scary. That was a good book by him. Nice ghost story. But, you know, it just... What do you do? What do you do? You know? I look at it this way. Instead of worrying about the people who make the piece of entertainment, I look at the message in it. You know? I try to look at the message in it, and, you know, because if you're going to sit there and say, well, I can't watch that movie because such and such is a commie, I can't listen to such and such music because he, you know, like I said, I don't worry about what someone's political leanings are nowadays. I look at what they're saying in their art more than anything else.
Where are we going next?
It's probably why I don't buy a lot of Bruce Springsteen albums anymore.
Oh, why did his image pop up in my head when you just said that as well?
Because we used to be big Bruce Springsteen fans.
Y'all know that Born in the USA is actually a protest song.
Yes. It's about, well...
And Americans sit there and play that on 4th of July. Born in the... Oh, come on. Give me a break.
It's set for during the Korean War.
Yeah.
Because he mentions Kaisan in there and all that. Let's go to this. This is kind of along the lines of breakdown of society. This is from... This is from the Christian News Network. Army training classifies evangelical Christianity as religious extremism, along with Al-Qaeda and Hamas. During a military training session in Pennsylvania, an unnamed United States Army instructor listed evangelical Christianity as an example of religious extremism, along with Al-Qaeda and Hamas.
I have his name, by the way.
Yeah, I think it mentions his name eventually here. While the session reportedly occurred over a year ago, the matter is just now coming to light. It involved a briefing with an Army Reserve unit that was receiving training on extremism around the world. Alliance Defending Freedom obtained a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, which, by the way, I downloaded, which includes a slide that lists 18 religious groups that the instructor deemed to be extremist. While it is not known whether the groups were ordered in relation to their severity, evangelical Christianity appears first on the list, followed by the Muslim Brotherhood, ultra-Orthodox Judaism, a group called Christian Identity, Al-Qaeda, and Hamas.
You know who those are, Christian Identity?
I'm not sure.
White supremacists.
I had a feeling it might be. But yeah.
In fact, I have a follow-up article that answers some of the questions that people might have about that.
Extremism is a complex phenomenon. It is defined as beliefs, attitudes, feelings, actions, or strategies of a character far removed from the ordinary, the slide states. Because ordinary is subjective, no religious group would label itself extreme or its doctrine extremism. However, religious extremism is not limited to any single religion, ethnic group, or region of the world. Every religion has some followers that believe that their beliefs, customs, and traditions are the only right way, and that all others are practicing their faith the wrong way, seeing and believing that their faith, religion, is superior to all others. Extremism organizations follow ideologies which are considered extreme by societal norms, another slide outlines. And we are talking about this today because the individuals who hold extremist views that conflict with Army values are sometimes inadvertently recruited. Ron Cruz of the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty told reporter Todd Starnes of Fox News that he was disturbed by the inclusion of evangelical Christians in the presentation. We find this offensive to have evangelical Christians to be listed among known terrorist groups, he stated. It is dishonorable for any U.S. military entity to allow this type of wrong-headed characterization. Army Representative George Wright stated that the slide was not endorsed by the military and was an individual effort. The slide was not produced by the Army and certainly does not reflect our policy or doctrine, he said. It was produced by an individual without anyone in the chain of command's knowledge or permission. Wright also noted that the slide has now been deleted from the presentation due to a complaint. The presenter, who remains unnamed, has since apologized. One of the soldiers who was present at the training briefing requested copies. No, I didn't. Okay. He considers himself an evangelical Christian and did not appreciate being classified with terrorists, Cruz outlined. There was a pervasive attitude in the presentation that anything associated with religion is an extremist. Yeah, anyone associated. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the presentation had utilized information and data collected by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Boy. There we go.
An organization that classifies hate groups throughout the country. The Southern Poverty Law Center came under criticism last year after it branded the Christian nonprofit lobbying group Family Research Council as a hate group for holding a biblical viewpoint on the institution of marriage. It denies, however, that all evangelical Christians are considered hate groups. There's a lot to be said about that article.
Well, it tells you who's in the crosshairs, and it ain't Al-Qaeda.
And it says evangelical Christianity as opposed to Catholic, as opposed to just regular Protestant. They make the point of saying evangelical because those are the ones that don't usually give in. I mean, come on. How many, honest to God, how many Episcopal, Catholic, Methodist, Lutheran churches are falling in line with this social justice movement? How many evangelical churches are? Probably none. Most of them are the ones that don't have a, quote, extremist point of view. That's why they want to go against them. You want to explain what social justice is?
Well, social justice is just a cover. I mean, they talk about social justice. Social justice is just a cover for implementing, big statist, big statist.
But they do
agenda.
it through churches. They do it through churches quite a bit.
What's Warren's a big one? I don't want to pile on Warren.
Rick Warren?
Rick Warren, his son committed suicide.
I didn't know he was big into the social justice. I didn't know that.
Not social justice, but he's really big into kowtowing. He's a lukewarm Christian, I believe.
Okay, I haven't heard him enough.
I don't know social justice, but what's his name?
Jim Wallace. Jim Wallace.
Oh, Jim Wallace.
Reverend Wright.
Reverend Wright's definitely.
Cardinal Flager.
No, Flager.
Or
boy, he's a freak.
Bishop Flager, or whatever his name.
Yeah.
Pastor Flager. That's right, Pastor Flager. I mean, all of them are. They're like that. They'll like Obama's brought, or no, he hasn't brought it up, but you've heard some of his religious. What's he called?
Yeah. When's the last time he's been to church?
Some of his religious mentors have said, Jim Wallace has said this. I heard Jim Wallace say this. Jim Wallace has said that, of course and he talks kind of like this.
Yeah, that's.
Of course we have to raise taxes to help the poor. Jesus said to give to the poor and to help the poor. He said
donate, not by the force of gun.
Give. Exactly. He said give. He didn't say coerce people into doing it. Giving is voluntary. Giving comes from the heart. It is not coerced.
There's so much deceit and so much deception. You have to wade through it all.
And you have to pay attention to the words they use and where they use them, how they use them, what words, because it's orchestrated. It is totally orchestrated. They're using certain words and using them in a certain way for a reason.
Psyops.
Exactly. I mean, we gotta be attentive to this, people. We have to. It's just... I mean, come on. What branch of government has always been defensive of religion? Always had religion as one of its pillars. The military, folks.
Real quick, we're talking about how language is misused. This is a perfect segue. We all know who George Orwell
Right.
was he wrote in 1984. He also did a lot of different other things. One of my actually favorite books was a homage to Catalonia, which was his experiences in the Spanish Civil War, where he actually got inspiration to write 1984 because he was fighting alongside the communists, and he realized how wrong they were. But anyway, he also wrote it was a short essay from 1946. It was called Politics in the English Language. And it's basically about how language is used and misused, and oftentimes used to deceive. And he comes up with 6 different rules, if you're ever writing, never to break. And number 1 is, he says, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you're used to seeing in print. In other words, don't use bumper stickers. You know, those they don't really convey anything. They just convey some sort of conventional norm. You remember Laughing, Ronan Martin's Laughing. They'd have these little sayings that would pop up all over the place. Sock it to me, just,
you got to be old farts like us to remember that.
Stupid, nonsensical things that really don't mean anything. They just kind of cloud your brain. Number 2 is never use a long word where a short one will do.
You bet your bippy.
You bet your bippy. Sock it to me. Never use a long word where a short one will do. Perfect. Number 3, if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Because it just clouds everything. Just make everything as concise as you can. Number 4, never use the passive where you can use the active. What that means is, never say, the man's head was cut off. Always say, the man with the sword cut the man's head off. That's passive as opposed to active. You want to explain, because what passive tends to do is it tends to take motive. It tends to take responsibility away from somebody. Instead of saying Bob cut Tim's head off, you say Tim's head was cut off. It's passive as opposed to active. Number 5, never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Again, you always want to convey meaning so people can understand what you're saying. And this is a man who understood communism. He wrote 1984.
He wrote it in the during World War II.
Yes, double speak.
Newspeak. He called it newspeak.
Newspeak. He understood how language was used to form the mind and thought. And number 6, break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. In other words, don't break them, or else you're. And the last sentence, he says, political language, and with variations, this is true of all political parties from conservatives to anarchists, is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. There you go. So that's George Orwell speaking from the grave from 1946, talking about how language is used to.
And as an example, the guys who came up with much of the language of the abortion argument, and one of which is now recanted and said I was wrong. He said that he knew that if they were to actually say it the way it is, then no one would follow them. That's why instead of saying I'm pro-abortion, came up with pro-choice.
Well, yeah, the world is full of that right now. I have a lawyer friend who I served in the Army with who fights me all the time about the Second Amendment. Yet he supports Roe v. Wade, and I always ask him, it's like, how can you reject something that's expressly written into our Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment,
something that's
and support something that's not even close to being there? Suspend your, whatever you believe about about abortion and so forth, but just look at them for what they are.
It's intellectually dishonest is what it is.
It's very intellectually dishonest. And even the people that support abortion will tell you that Roe v. Wade was not even a good law.
So while we're on,
right, the privacy?
While we're on the subject of abortion, we have another sound clip.
Oh, yeah, oh boy. This is really...
You want to set this one up?
This is really chilling. This was done... I can't remember the woman's name.
Alyssa Lapolt Snow.
Yeah, she was testifying in front of the Florida Congress of Florida. Is that correct?
It was something I don't recall what it was called. It was it was basically about babies that survive botched abortions.
Yes, it's whether or not that you can. It's acceptable to kill a baby outside the womb.
This is a little bit of a long clip.
A baby that survives an abortion, a botched abortion.
And this is kind of a long clip, so give it a listen. It's about a 5-minute long clip. Actually, 6 minutes.
You're recognized for a question, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's just really hard for me to even ask you this question because I'm almost in disbelief. If a baby is born on a table as a result of a botched abortion, what would Planned Parenthood want to have happen to that child that's struggling for life?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we believe that any decision that's made should be left up to the woman, her family, and the physician.
Okay, Chair Davis, and then we'll come back to you, Rep. Oliva.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe you were in the committee room whenever I asked Representative Pigman the question about what happens in a situation where a baby is alive, breathing on a table, moving. What do your physicians do at that point?
You're recognized.
I do not have that information. I am not a physician. I'm not an abortion provider. So I do not have that information.
Go ahead, sir.
I understand that you're not a physician, but you do represent physicians who do perform this activity. And can you tell me what happens when a baby is alive on the table at that point? What do they do with the baby that is struggling to live?
You're recognized.
I don't know, and as it's been referenced earlier, we don't know even how prevalent this situation is.
I don't know how else I can get an answer, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, we'll go to Representative Oliva for his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines, you stated that a baby born on a table as a result of a botched abortion, that decision should be left to the doctor and the family. Is that what you're saying?
It should. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That decision should be between the patient and the healthcare provider.
Hello, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that at that point, the patient would be the child struggling on a table. Wouldn't you agree?
You're recognized.
That's a very good question. I really don't know how to answer that. I think, I would be glad to have some more, conversations with you about this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cleland for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the law doesn't speak to a physician's obligation in an abortion clinic setting, then what conflict do you have here? You mentioned in your testimony that the law already speaks to that, but if it doesn't in the abortion clinic setting, what issue do you have with that being codified in this bill?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question.
You can rephrase it.
Thank you. From what I gathered from your testimony, physicians have an obligation already under the law to provide advanced life support to a child born alive. But if the law doesn't speak to that in an abortion clinic setting, and I think the bill sponsor, who's a physician, testified that it doesn't, then what issue would you have with that being in the current bill?
You're recognized.
Okay, are we talking about my reference to the federal law?
I suppose so, yeah.
Okay, because I just want to be clear. We support the neutrality clause that was in the Federal Born Alive Infants Protection Act of 2012, which has been addressed.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. Does that address the obligation of a doctor in an abortion clinic setting to provide advanced life support to a child who was born alive in an abortion?
No, the neutrality clause addresses the situation where this particular language can't be extrapolated out through other, statutes dealing with abortion. It just deals with this particular area.
Okay.
So,
notwithstanding that, does Planned Parenthood have an objection to a doctor being obligated to provide advanced life support in an abortion clinic setting to a child born alive? I mean, I guess you do, or you wouldn't be here, right?
You're recognized.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just pause and say where our opposition remains. Okay, and maybe that can answer some questions. We have serious concerns about the surrender, wording in this. The second piece is, as you all discussed earlier, was the transport to the hospital. We would like to be in a position to remove our opposition, and again, Representative Pigman has been great to work with. He's been, very friendly to us in terms of some language that we were trying to seek. So I do want to, give him kudos for that.
One final follow-up, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the indulgence. What objection could you possibly have to obligate a doctor to transport a child born alive to a hospital, where it seems to me they would be most likely to be able to survive?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What about this, and I'm just speaking out loud here, what about those situations where it's in a rural healthcare setting, the hospital is 45 minutes, an hour away, that's the closest trauma center, emergency room. There's just some logistical issues involved that we've got some concerns about.
Okay, thank you very much, and we will proceed.
Thank you.
I think we're done with questions of members here. Thank you, ma'am.
What do the logistical issues have to do with it?
It's disingenuous, you know that.
It's totally, I mean...
she's trying to justify
murder.
Yes.
Pretty much. And if you ever had any doubt as to whether the fetus is a living, breathing human being, this is something entirely different. This is babies that have survived a procedure, an abortion procedure, that are gasping for their lives.
I love the one congressman, I think he's a congressman, who switched, who turned the tables on her and said, well, then the patient now is the child and not the mother. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And she wouldn't recognize that.
Not to mention the fact that, the term that's always bandied about is viable. Is the fetus viable? Well, viability is earlier and earlier now. I have an ex-girlfriend who had a son that was born C-section at 5.5 months and is now 27 years old.
So when they call
he's a great guy.
When they call an unborn child a fetus, you're just a liar. I'm sorry, you're just a liar. You know exactly what that baby will be. You know exactly. We all know that. We're not morons.
Do you know what fetus means in Latin? Baby. That's what it means. It's like going back to last week where people were talking about the gay same-sex marriage thing. Someone was trying to tell me that matrimony, on Facebook was trying to say matrimony is a religious ceremony, whereas marriage is a legal binding contract. Well, if you look up matrimony, one of the definitions of Merriam-Webster is marriage.
She sounded like that little kid who got caught with his hand in the candy jar. Did you swipe that piece of candy? Oh, no, really, I didn't.
Exactly.
That's what she sounded like. There was not.
It's like, okay.
There was no power on her end.
It's like, you took that candy, didn't you? It kind of reminds me of her cousin.
Yeah.
When she was little, doesn't it?
It was just weak.
Yeah, it was. And I don't know, folks. They'll do anything to continue and to push their agenda and to continue the agenda they've already started.
And it's an agenda of death.
Yeah.
Well, you tell me that you tell me that the Planned Parenthood. Well, from its inception, Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist.
And
She wanted to kill a lot of babies, most of them black, by the way.
And how have they couched the argument? What term has they couched the argument in recent years? Women's health issues.
Oh boy!
You know, it's a women's health issue.
And if
No,
ladies, if you're that stupid, God bless you, man.
You know. Anyway.
Well, they always try to couch it in deceptive terms.
Yeah, and if you get people to say we've got to spend money on women's health issues instead of saying we got to get people who are pro-life siding with you, even, you know, it's gonna. You got anything else?
Well, it depends on if you want to go there or not. You know, I've got some gun stuff. You know.
Sure, let's go with the gun stuff. Yeah.
This is an article that really kind of peeved a lot of people off, you know, when I posted it on Facebook the other day. It comes from a source called Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. Let me restate that. Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. In the
JPFO. I know them well.
JPFO. Well, I didn't know that there was such a group.
Just kidding.
But it's called, this is going to take a few minutes, but the reason I'm going to do it is because it's using the same tactic that's been used against conservatives for a long time. It basically takes an idea and tries to makes a case for it being irrational and maybe even, you know, not psychotic, but irrational. It's called Raging Against Self-Defense. The psychiatrist examines the anti-gun mentality. And it's written by a woman. Oh boy, she's a psychiatrist, and it didn't print her last name. Her name's Sarah. That's all I can go on right now. It says, how often have you heard statements from misguided advocates of victim disarmament or even woefully uninformed relatives and neighbors? Why do people cling so tightly to these beliefs? Basically calling, you know, certain things don't print up when I print them, but they're typical statements for people who are against guns. You know, like, why do guns kill so many people? You know, the illogical things. And why do people cling so tightly to these beliefs in the face of incontrovertible evidence that they are wrong? Why do they get so furiously angry when gun owners point out their arguments are factually and logically incorrect? How can you communicate with these people who seem to be out of touch with reality and rational thought? One approach to help you deal with anti-gun people is to understand their psychological processes. Once you understand why these people behave so irrationally, you can communicate more effectively with them. The reason I'm going here is because for so many years, if you Google conservatism and mental illness, 166,000 entries will pop up. So basically what I'm doing is I'm turning the tables on the progressives, liberals, whatever you want to call them, and I'm going to go into why. The thrust of her argument is that, you know, these people engage in these, you know, a lot of their arguments purely for defense mechanisms. And one of them is called projection. And I love projection because I don't love it. I love it in the fact that I recognize it when I see it. And a lot of, you can go on MSNBC with Chris Matthews all the time calling people racist. I think he's engaging in the projection because I believe he's really the racist. Anyway, projection. About a year ago, I received an email from a member of a local Jewish organization. The author, who chose to remain anonymous, insisted that people have no right to carry firearms because he didn't want to be murdered if one of his neighbors had a bad day. And I don't know what that this person is a he, but I'm assuming so for the sake of simplicity, whatever. I responded by asking him why he thought his neighbors wanted to murder him, and of course got no response. The truth is that he's statistically more likely to be murdered by a neighbor who doesn't legally carry a firearm, or more likely to be shot accidentally by a law enforcement officer. How does my correspondent know that his neighbors would murder him if they had no gun? I'm not gonna go on very much longer, but basically what he's doing, he's projecting his fear of if he had a gun, would he shoot somebody with it? And he's projecting that onto the person who has no intent whatsoever of using that gun to shoot anybody. So that's what projection is. It's a defense mechanism. Defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological mechanisms that protect people from feelings that they cannot consciously accept. They operate without awareness so that they don't have to deal consciously with forbidden feelings and impulses. Thus, if you ask, this guy, if he really wanted to murder his neighbors, he would vehemently deny it, insist that other people wanted to kill him. It's insidious. It's an insidious defense mechanism because it not only prevents a person from dealing with his own feelings, it creates a world where he perceives everyone else is directing his own hostile feelings back at him.
It's kind of like saying, it's like someone will say in a given set of circumstances, I'll do this. And because I'll do this, so will you.
Yeah.
Basically, when they're two entirely different people.
It goes on. A second defense mechanism is called denial. It's simply refusing to accept the reality of a given situation. For example, consider a woman whose husband starts coming home late, has strange perfume on his clothes, and starts charging flowers and jewelry on his credit card. She may get extremely angry at a well-meaning friend who suggests that her husband is having an affair. The reality is obvious, but the wronged wife is so threatened by her husband's infidelity that she is unable to accept it, and so denies its existence. Anti-gun people do the same thing. It's obvious that we live in a dangerous society where criminals attack innocent people. Just about everyone has been or knows someone who has been victimized. It's equally obvious that law enforcement can't protect everyone 24 hours a day. Extensive research demonstrates that the police have no legal duty to protect you, and that firearm ownership is the most effective way to protect yourself and your family. There is irrefutable evidence that victim disarmament nearly always precedes genocide. I've posted things about that. Nonetheless, the anti-gun folks insist, despite all evidence to the contrary, that the police will protect you. This is a safe neighborhood. It can't happen here. Everything from mugging to mass, where it is everything from mugging to mass murder. Anti-gun people who refuse to accept the reality of the proven and very serious danger of civilian disarmament are using denial to protect themselves from the anxiety of feeling helpless and vulnerable. Likewise, gun owners who insist that the government will never confiscate my guns are also using denial to protect themselves from the anxiety of contemplating being forcibly disarmed and rendered helpless and vulnerable. And the last one is called reaction formation. And it's real quick. Reaction formation is yet another defense mechanism common among the anti-gun folks. Reaction formation occurs when a person's mind turns an unacceptable feeling or desire into its complete opposite. For example, a child who is jealous of a sibling may exhibit excessive love and devotion for the hated brother or sister.
You know, a good example of that is, good example is black people don't like being called the N-word. It's offensive, and rightly so, but they'll embrace it amongst themselves and call each other it. Or women don't like being called the B word by other people, but they'll refer to themselves as that.
I guess
and embrace it.
It depends on who you hang out with. And the last part it's called the common thread. It's one paragraph. In my experience, the common thread in anti-gun people is rage. Either anti-gun people harbor more rage than others, or they're less able to cope with it appropriately. Because they can't handle their own feelings of rage, they are forced to use defense mechanisms in an unhealthy manner. Because they wrongly perceive others as seeking to harm them, they advocate the disarmament of ordinary people who have no desire to harm them at all. So why do anti-gun people have so much rage, and why are they unable to deal with it in appropriate ways? Consider for a moment that the largest and most hysterical anti-gun groups include disproportionately large numbers of women, African Americans, and Jews. And virtually all the organizations that claim to speak for these oppressed people are stridently anti-gun. Not coincidentally, among Jews, blacks, and women, there are many professional victims, I'm doing air quotes here, professional victims who have little sense of identity outside their victimhood.
Not to mention those who condone it, such as, dare I say it, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. I said it.
So the author goes on to say, if I were to summarize this article in 3 sentences, they would be: 1, People who identify themselves as victims harbor excessive amounts of rage at other people whom they perceive as not victims. 2, in order psychologically to deal with this rage, these victims utilize defense mechanisms that enable them to harm others in socially acceptable ways without accepting responsibility or suffering guilt, and without having to give up their status as victims. And number 3, gun owners are frequently the targets of professional victims because gun owners are willing and able to prevent their own victimization.
Of course. I mean, owning a gun is an outward sign of what you feel when it comes to... You're saying, basically, I'm not going to be a victim if you're a gun owner. You're just not. And let me expand upon that thing also. The people who condone victimization, I said Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. You've also got Medea Benjamin with Code Pink. You've got, just name it.
Yeah, she's a radical.
You know?
But this kind of explains, what the population at large who want to get rid of guns. It doesn't explain the government wanting to get rid of guns. That's a whole different argument. That's all about control and
how they're going to get rid of guns is by buying up all the ammo.
Well, they're already doing it.
They're doing that. I don't know what else I can say, folks. All right, well, I'll tell you what. That's this week's show. We will be back here next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And, go to the website, www.savingtherepublic.net. That's .net. There is a .com, but it's not us. .net is it. And we've got some different closing music for you this week, guys. This is something by Stain. It's called Now.
Good night, folks.